Boston, America. From the cradle of America's Christian liberty and freedom, we are ready to resurrect America, calling it heaven's rescued land. Well, it's a joy to join you. Tonight, we have been listening to all of the news stories about civil distress in this nation, and I want to remind our listeners on this Resurrect America show, we have spoken this quite often, that all of the great awakenings since the time of Christ normally come in the beginning of a century, and they are followed after 4 to 8 years of revival. None of them last any longer than that. That's the cycle we see consistently over the last 2,000 years. All of them are followed immediately by civil distress with catastrophic loss of life. So the question becomes, does the enemy of our faith come in to stop the great awakenings and revival, or does God, working with the prophetic utterance of Jesus, stating that there would be wars and rumors of wars, that it would be catastrophic and it would continue like birth pangs, as one would see a woman in travail? It starts out slight and light, and then the travail pains get worse until finally they are so rapid there's no cessation of it, and the baby is born. And that's the way we think that Jesus was prophesying about his time unto the end of the age or the end of the world. And what we see is that after these great awakenings, there comes a time of civil distress where millions of lives are lost. So the question amongst theologians has been, does God send the awakening to stop what is coming, or simply to prepare that generation for heaven rather than the bowels of hell, knowing that the next birth pang is going to take them there? And what we're seeing here in the United States of America right now, we've really missed a cycle. For the first time in 2,000 years, the big awakening we were expecting at the beginning of this century started around the end of the 1990s, and we saw big signs of it into 2004 when suddenly it aborted. It never came full circle. We never had the awakening we needed. And in 2002, I've told you on this radio show many times of the prophetic appearance of Jesus in a vision that I had in prayer, where he said, if this nation continues to divide itself down the middle, a nation divided against itself will not stand. And that's exactly what we're seeing now. So I've brought in an expert tonight that I greatly respect. Met this fella a few years ago. He's a wonderful, talented musician, and you ought to hear him sing sometime. He's got recordings. I'll let him tell you about those. We've had him with us on the Lincoln Memorial Steps a few years ago out at Sing in America rally when we were celebrating the bicentennial of the national anthem. But even more important than that, John Guandolo is a veteran from the Marine Corps, having done many tours overseas in Iraq during the Gulf War. And he came back and was one of our senior intel officials after the horrible catastrophe of 9/11 as an FBI specialist. And now he's the president of an organization called Understanding the Threat. So I'm going to let John speak into these issues tonight. John, it's good to have you here. Just enjoy yourself on this broadcast, sir.
Well, thanks for having me, as always. Really appreciate it. Great to be sharing the truth with you this evening.
Well, thank you, John. And where are you right now?
I'm in Dallas, Texas. That's where we're operating out of. That's where is our home base these days.
Well, that's wonderful. I know you've moved from where I had first met you. Now, tell us what Understanding the Threat organization is all about.
Well, we are an organization that focuses on national security, so we're a national security consulting organization. We provide advice and consulting, training, briefings, teachings for local, state, and federal officials, citizens, whoever is in need of the training, which actually that's everybody, but people that would like the training. But what we do that separates us from everyone else is we are the only ones in the nation who provide specific ways to map out the jihadi networks in your communities and provide, for instance, law enforcement with specific ways to dismantle and investigatively go after those networks. We're also the only ones in the country that lay out the threat and work with state officials, state leaders, to create strategies to dismantle the networks. And so that is who we are and what we do. We are very unique, and I am a part, obviously, of this team, and there are several members on our team, but the other gentleman that has a significant background is Chris Gobbins, who is the gentleman who went undercover at the headquarters of U.S. Hamas in the United States, also doing business as CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations. Back in 2008, the book Muslim Mafia was written about his experiences. So we present the threat of Islam in the United States from the perspective of a doctrinal examination of what Islam teaches, because 100% of our enemies say they're Muslims waging jihad in order to establish an Islamic state under Sharia. So that's the first part. And then when we talk about the networks here, we lay out evidence from the largest terrorism trials in American history. And I will just end the answer to your question with this. The unanimous response to our training, especially when we're talking about law enforcement and our 3-day training program, is that none of the law enforcement officials have ever heard what we present. That's their response when we ask them, have you heard this before? They all say no, and that includes FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force agents and officers, and yet they all agree that it's critical to protecting the community. So that's who we are, what we do, and why we're very unique, because we're the only ones in the country doing it.
Well, John, I was so privileged to have met you through Rick Joyner's organization and met General Jerry Boykin and Steve Coughlin and others. And then I was very blessed, folks, to be asked by these gentlemen to go to their Strategic Engagement Group Academy, where I just saw first-class stellar educational practices taking place on the highest possible level. The integrity was just over the roof. And I enjoyed hosting John while my husband was still alive. We were in a position to be able to do that. And we hosted him in Oklahoma and different locations. I've participated in some of these briefings and conferences. And I know the reaction from everybody that attended, whether they were law enforcement, government, or church leaders, was all the same. They wanted to hear more of it. They were extremely grateful, and their lives were never the same afterwards. So I'd like to bring John on board with our Paul Revere Midnight Ride, which will at some point be a traveling conference which will go to many different locations. We'll kind of blitz down the East Coast and head right from Maine to Washington and give people an 8-hour-a-day seminar, like the one I participated in when I first met them at Rick Joyner's, and then leave you in high praise and worship, because the best answer is still on our knees even after we do all the practical things. So we don't leave you with fear tonight as he speaks. He's speaking because God has given him the intelligence to do so, the anointing to do so, and has given him the wherewithal. And your reaction to this tonight should not be fear, but I hope that you will have gratitude in your heart for this watchman. He's like a Paul Revere, telling us what's coming. But then you will be able to just praise God and ask him what comes next. And as you just get more intense about your prayer life for this nation, he'll direct you. He'll show you practical steps to take. And I believe John will give you some contact information. John, let's give them the contact information right now. As people are tuning in and taking notes, how can they get in touch with you, sir?
Well, first of all, we encourage people to use the website, understandingthethreat.com. We encourage you to sign up for the newsletter. You can follow us on our Twitter site. Understanding the Threat's Twitter site is at UTT_USA. And of course, mine is at John Guandolo, Guandolo. We have a YouTube site, Understanding the Threats. We encourage people to subscribe, and we certainly encourage people to go to Facebook and like us. And all of those are modes to get different parts of this of the story of the threat, and it comes at you in a variety of mediums. You can contact us directly through the website. And one of the things I would encourage right up front, since you asked, is for groups that are civic groups or citizen groups, or for churches, if you want to bring us in and have us come in for either a half a day or a day or even just a few hours in the evening, We have, because of the threat to churches and the threat in the United States from the Islamic movement, and as I know you said you wanted to get into the hard left Marxist movement, working with the jihadi movement, with the Islamic movement, we have put aside all of our fees for these programs. So essentially, if we will come to anywhere in the country to speak, so long as our expenses are covered.
Praise God.
For instance, in a church, like you take off a love offering and things like that, we will do it because this is such an important issue. And we have a lot of resources on the site. We have free resources on our site. Go to Understand the Threat. There's a resource page. At our store, we have books, DVDs, and we're actually coming out with a couple new books and at least one new DVD in the near future. So there's a lot going on, but the threat is getting significantly worse week by week.
Yes, it is. Now, John, I want you to repeat the contact information again, but I do want to tell these people that you're actually listening to what I consider to be the top expert in the country tonight on this subject. So I want all of you really to take this very, very seriously. John, give them your information one more time. And I would highly recommend you to any pastor or any civic leader that would like to hear more about it. We did bring John into the Boston State House one time, and that was a tremendous meeting, and many people were helped by it. So, John, give them the information one more time. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, it's understandingthethreat.com. You can contact us through our contact page on the website. You can email us directly at info@understandingthethreat.com. And again, Facebook and YouTube, just Understanding the Threat is how you sign up there. And then UTT_USA is our Twitter, or at John Guandolo. So please, do that, and also sign up for our newsletter on our homepage. We definitely encourage that.
Yes. Now, John, let's get right into the meat of the matter here. We've got terrible civil distress going on. Some people say that George Soros is behind it, raising up a ruckus with racial riots, that he's an expert at causing riots and taking down economies and governments, but I think there's a lot more going on. I've talked to the people yesterday on the broadcast about the revisionists of history that have tried to reconfigure our patriots like Thomas Jefferson in Washington as being some kind of horrible white supremacist. They weren't. They had inherited large slave populations on their plantations. We were told by the experts in the historical departments down at Williamsburg when David was alive that had Thomas Jefferson wished to release all of his slaves, he would have gone to prison for it under the rule of the tyranny of King George. He could have only released 6 slaves a year with horrific sanctions that would have sunk him. It was aimed to curtail that activity. So he wisely instead chose the battle of the Revolution against King George himself, crafting the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights with other patriots that thereby allowed a future where women like me could vote, run for office, and a man could even of a black race become president, as Obama just was. But I think there's a whole lot more going on here than just trying to destroy our patriots. The benevolence of our chaplains after the Civil War was the advice to the President and generals of the North, allowed the South to also honor their generals from their culture, and let's let this nation heal. But they are trying to rip us apart at the seams, trying to rip this president apart. So what do you see? Where do you think this is headed?
Well, first you have to look at where we are. And so I know you, just in your introductory comments, I know you have people listening that don't fully understand the threat. So
no, they don't.
I can't give a couple minutes of background understanding of a couple of the key pieces.
Yes.
So first is what I started to say earlier. 100% of the enemy we're facing in the wars that we've been engaged in Europe, overseas in Iraq, Afghanistan, Africa, Asia, and elsewhere, where we have American troops that are actually either providing guidance to foreign host nations or actually engaged in combat. 100% of those folks, including the people that have been arrested in Europe and the United States, including people that have been killed in Europe and the United States, people that we captured on the battlefield, and from what we get from ISIS, Al-Qaeda, the Muslim Brotherhood, Tablighi Jamaat, Boko Haram, Abu Sayyaf, Al-Shabaab, Hezbollah, Hamas, they all say the same thing. we are Muslims waging jihad in the cause of Allah to establish an Islamic State under Sharia. Now, that is that, and if we go deeper into why they say they're doing it, we find that the reasoning behind why they're doing it is exactly the same reasoning taught in elementary and junior high school Islamic schools in the Middle East, in Africa, in Europe, and in the United States. When we look at what the highest authorities in Islam say, like Al-Azhar in Cairo, Egypt, the highest authority for Islamic jurisprudence on the planet, it says the same thing. So when you hear an Islamic leader say, or somebody else say, for that matter, that Islam doesn't stand for the violence that ISIS is doing, that is categorically false. It's untrue. The truth is that Islamic doctrine is based on the Quran and the example of the Prophet Muhammad, and the Quran can only be understood when you understand that what comes chronologically last, what was revealed chronologically last, overrules legally what came before it. And what comes last is the permanent obligation to wage jihad, which is only defined in Islamic law as warfare against non-Muslims. It's a permanent obligation until the entire world is under Islam. Now, the other piece of where Sharia, Islamic doctrine, comes from is from the example of the Prophet. Well, the Quran says that Prophet Muhammad, Islam's prophet, is a beautiful pattern of conduct to be followed, an exalted standard for Muslims to follow. And it says in numerous other places similar things. And so we look, and authoritative Islam says that Muhammad tortured, that Muhammad said, I have been commanded to fight the unbelievers until they testify there's no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger. Excuse me, and then he went out and did it.
Oh my.
And we see that Muhammad also married a 6-year-old, consummated the relationship when she was 9.
Oh,
Muhammad condones the killing of people that mock him. And he condones the taking, because he did it, of slaves in battle, and used women as sex slaves. He said, whatever your right hand possesses. So while Muslims may only marry 4 wives, if they take 50 women in battle, he can have all of them as his sex slaves, as his wives. So this is all lawful. What ISIS is doing is lawful. The Quran discusses crucifixion, beheading, amputation for theft, stoning for adultery, whipping, banishment. All of those come right out of the Quran. They're called hudud laws, and so they are lawful in Islam.
Oh, that's terrible.
So when somebody says that these things are not a part of Islam, there's no version of Islam that does not teach this. And so our challenge is understanding the threat, and I'll give this to your listeners, is that if you can demonstrate that there's a different version of Islam out there that teaches love thy neighbor, do unto others, the golden rule, all that good stuff, we'd love to see it. Because we have $1,000 waiting for anybody that can demonstrate that what I just said about Islamic law is not true. So that's the first piece. The second piece is this.
So there's $1,000 reward if they can demonstrate that? Is that what you just said?
Yeah, if somebody can demonstrate what UTT teaches and publishes about Sharia, what it is, what its authority in Islam is, and what it actually says is untrue, and also about what I'm about to say about the Islamic network, the Muslim Brotherhood, their modus operandi, we will stop teaching it and give whoever brings it to our attention $1,000 cash. Now, we have publicly said this. We have sent notices in the newspaper in response to editorials by Muslim Brotherhood leaders that we're offering this. And of course, every time we do, the discussion ends.
Yes,
because
of course.
they know that they don't want to have an honest discussion. What they want is to shut us down. They don't want the discussion. And so I understand that a lot of your listeners are people of faith. And so my challenge is, we're called to speak truth boldly in love. So that's all understanding the threat does. We don't hate Muslims. We don't, even the ones that are violent, that want to kill us and have threatened us and have threatened me and my team. don't hate them, but we're certainly going to speak truth. And I would say one more thing on that note. If we truly are called to love everybody, including our enemies, then I would say, is it loving to, which is what a majority of pastors that we have come across do, is they defend Islam. They say, it's just like Christianity, it's an Abrahamic faith, they love their neighbor, all this nonsense. So they're either grossly ignorant, or they're lying, or they're blinded. But is it truly an act of love to leave someone in a barbaric totalitarian system like Islam, or don't we have an obligation to help bring them out of that?
Yes, exactly.
That seems like the loving thing to do.
Yes.
So I just want to kind of throw that into the mix. The next piece of this is what I started to say about the network. The largest terrorism financing trial ever successfully prosecuted in American history, the Holy Land Foundation, U.S. versus Holy Land Foundation, adjudicated in Dallas, Texas, 2008, and the evidence to 15-year FBI investigation revealed that, in fact, the most prominent Islamic organizations in the United States are part of a hostile Islamic movement, primarily led by the U.S. Muslim Brotherhood. And these groups include the very groups whose leaders have been, since 9/11, advising our presidents,
Yes.
our secretaries of defense, our secretaries of state,
Yeah.
the national security staffs, and many, many others. So this war is much more a war of narratives, propaganda, political influence, political warfare, espionage, counterintelligence, than it is merely about terrorism.
That's right. John, I want to say this too. I'm a member of the National Press Club, and over 47% of the National Press Club membership roster is Islamic, and the secretary to the last president that we had there, her last name was Mohammed. And that's the press corps.
Well, therein lies the point, is that this is an issue of controlling the message. This is where they intend to win the war. And 16 years after 9/11, you still have 4-star generals saying that, ludicrous things like, in Islam there's a debate about what the word jihad means. That's ludicrous. No,
Yes.
there's not. No debate in Islam about that. There may be a debate in your office, General, because they've rendered you strategically stupid, and they're using you as a part of their campaign.
Yes.
But there's no discussion in Islam what the true legal definition of jihad is.
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you. Keep telling us now what you think is taking place in this nation. You've given us a tremendous background. And how do you think this is going over into the news every day now, of these folks causing racial tension, coming against the president, the press corps coming against him, and trying to erupt these riots over the destruction of these statues? What do you think is going on?
So, we just published an article this morning at Understanding the Threat. You can just get our blog, and like I said, if you sign up for the newsletter, you will just get these automatically, Monday and Thursday. Today's article is entitled U.S. Islamic Movement Enters the Final Stage.
Wow.
And so our analysis is they are in the leading edge, if you will, of the final stage. So the Islamic movement is working and cooperating with, never partnered with, cooperating with the hard left Marxist movement, the Marxist Socialist Communist Party USA, but primarily Marxist and Soros-funded groups like Black Lives Matter, Antifa, or Black Lives Matter, Antifa, Answer, Code Pink, many of these foreign socialist groups, and there are too many to mention. But certainly that includes the Southern Poverty Law Center, the American Civil Liberties Union, the NAACP, the Anti-Defamation League, groups like J Street, and others that are hostile to the United States in and of themselves. Now, we see on the ground level the leader of the U.S. Muslim Brotherhood, Nihad Awad, who is also the leader of Hamas in the United States, which, for those of you not aware, Hamas is an inherent part of the Muslim Brotherhood. We see him 2 years ago, almost, in December of 2015, at the Muslim Brotherhood conference in Chicago, hosted by Muslim Brotherhood organizations, Muslim American Society, and Islamic Circle of North America. We see this leader of the U.S. Muslim Brotherhood say in front of the whole crowd, Black Lives Matter is our matter. Black Lives Matter is our campaign. And then we see leaders from Black Lives Matter supporting the Palestinian cause, the Hamas cause.
Oh my goodness.
And so we see in places like Ferguson and Baltimore and Charlotte and, everywhere where we see these violent left-wing outbursts, we have collusion and cooperation with the Islamic movement. And so, to answer your question, the article today demonstrates, and what we are trying to show is, we have seen violence from the hard left in the last several years, right? I mean, we've seen it, it's been getting worse in the United States and in Europe as well, but in the United States, noticeably in the last few years. So what makes this violence, the violence in Charlottesville and Seattle and some of the stuff we saw in Boston in the last several days, what makes it different? Well, the difference is, and you know this, Shelley, because you've been trained, is that there are a couple of things for your audience that I want to highlight. Number one, the closer the Islamic movement gets to victory, the more truthful they are about their intentions.
Yes.
So I want you to keep that in mind. So with that in mind, what have we seen in the last 5 weeks? We have seen Hamas leader at UC Berkeley, who also happens to be a UC Berkeley professor, Hamas leader Hatem Bosnian, publicly call for an intifada, a violent uprising against the United States.
My
We
goodness.
see Linda Sarsour, who comes from a Hamas family, calling for a jihad against the President of the United States. We now have no less than 3 or 4 imams in the United States calling for the annihilation of its Jews.
My goodness.
These, in my world, analyzing this threat, those are huge red flags because they're no longer hiding in the shadows. They're just saying, we want jihad, we want an intifada, we want Jews annihilated, and they're not hiding it anymore. That is a huge, as we would say in the Marine Corps, Red Star cluster, that the bad guys believe they are much closer to victory than they were even a year ago. And so that's a piece of it. Now we also see in the political warfare sector, we see literally the entire Democrat leadership standing behind Antifa. We see them standing with and behind the Islamic movement, defending them in ways we have not seen to this extent before. And we now have Republican leaders doing the same thing, especially with Antifa, like Mitt Romney, Marco Rubio, John McCain, and others. So as you're watching all of these things transpire, they paint a picture.
Listen, John, hold on just 1 minute. Hold on. Well, listeners, we've got about 1 minute left on this broadcast, and I know you want to hear a whole lot more from this very well-informed man, John Guandolo. John, take a few more seconds and tell us what you want to conclude with here, and then we want our listeners to get in touch with you, and we'll post your information on the website. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I would just say this. With what I just laid out, you will see in the coming months more violence and unrest in the streets. And eventually, it may be a couple months, it may even be a number of months down the road, just like the brown shirts in Germany, these hard left Marxist movements are going to be taken out, and whether they're taken out by the jihadis, they're going to be eliminated, and whoever eliminates them is going to say, see, we're restoring order. This is the history of how this happens. But what I want people to understand is the leading edge of violence can be precipitated by a number of events, but we are watching what the Islamic movement believes is the leading edge of their final phase of overthrowing our government.
Wow. Well, John, I'm going to have you back on as my guest again. Everybody, I guarantee you, and look for us to give you announcements of when we're going to bring him back to the Boston State House and other state houses. We're going to do this Paul Revere Midnight Tour, and we're going to bring John from Understanding the Threat and a few other folks that have helped in the training school he put together on board, because you all need to hear this. Now, we're not leaving you in fear tonight. Psalm 91, you go read it this evening. But what I want to tell you to do is get on your knees and pray. Churches, you need to open up 24/7 prayer centers. You need to bring people like this in to educate your people, and we will be able to much better grasp how to bring our nation back under the control of the Lord Jesus Christ as we take these steps. John, thank you so much, and we'll look forward to talking to you again. God bless you.
God bless you.
Thank you for calling us today. Receive your free gift by contacting us at www